Charles Power is the director of scouting and rankings for On3. And Charles, I appreciate you a ton for joining me today. We're just a day or so out from the new rankings that dropped on On3. Before we get into any of the guys on UF's commitment list, I've got to ask about the reactions that you get and which fan base gives you the hardest time about the rankings on a consistent basis.
It would be very hard to say if there's one on a consistent basis. It's honestly a little hard to predict. But I think some of it depends on certain prospects. I think we might be different on, and they've kind of become like hot button topics. So it would depend on year to year for sure. But I know there's a lot of discussion around Florida right now for sure.
And so then do you just kind of block it out because it comes with the territory, it's part of the job? Are you just numb to it because you've been doing it for so long?
There is a degree of numbness, but I do think I definitely want to try to make an effort to explain everything, because I do think we can explain everything we do, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. I think it's, we try to make an effort to at least be upfront and transparent on kind of our process, and I guess best explain it as best we can.
So we're going to talk about a few guys specifically, and a few, including DJ Lagway. But US fan base likes to get up in arms about a lot of things, and On3 rankings are no exception. Before we talk about whether they're justified or not, let's talk about the process that you alluded to for ranking kids. Can you dive into that a little bit for us?
Yeah. So basically, this is something that we start ranking these prospects. Really, our first watch list is prior to their sophomore season. So it's a multi-year rankings. Like, the ranking cycle process is like 3+ years. The group of prospects really grows as time goes on. So like right now, like we're ranking all the Power 5 commits. We rank every FBS signee. So I think it probably ends up being, the number fluctuates due to the transfer portal, but it ends up being, probably a couple thousand prospects. So we start off position rankings are the building blocks for all of our rankings, including like the On300, like the big list that everybody looks at. So we'll go through and we'll rank every quarterback, every running back, every receiver, every tight end in order. And then when we go to make the big list, that is kind of the driver. But as we're putting those position groups in order, we have a rating system, which is, for us, is it's 80 is the lowest. So like a kicker, for instance, most of our kickers are 80. We don't have 2 stars at On3.
As a specialist wife, this does not make me happy.
Which is the lowest 3-star, and then up to 100. 100 would be like a perfect rating for us. We haven't had a 100 since in the couple years that we've been doing this. So, so we assign that number rating. It's 5 stars are 98, 99, 100. 4 stars are 90 to 97. So as we're going through the position groups, we sort them out, we assign the grade, and when we go to put together the On300, it is sorted through each position group, and they're put in the big list. And there's a lot of movement. It's always very fluid. Like this last update, we had 45 prospects move in to the On300. Like, I think if you look at the amount, like the movement in our rankings, it's much more than any other ranking you would look at. And I think for us, it's an effort to try to get it right. And it's something that it's very fluid for us. It's something that we work on until we turn it in January. So there's a lot, it's highly fluid. And I would stress as well, this one was driven by seeing a lot of these guys in person, getting a lot of data. I've seen, I'd say probably hundreds of prospects in person dating back to February. And, so it's a lot of that, and it's setting the table for the senior year. And the senior year for us is the biggest evaluation point for the majority of prospects. It's, in my years of doing this, it's by far the best indicator of long-term potential, the type of college player they're going to be, and what we ultimately judge it on, which is the NFL draft. So and if you look at our recruiting rankings relative to the NFL draft, they've never been more accurate. Like our last, like the recruiting rankings that I was involved in at 24/7 Sports, the 2020 cycle was probably the most accurate recruiting ranking, I think, maybe of any kind ever, like any sport ever. I think it was probably more accurate than a lot of the basketball rankings, which is kind of crazy. Just just a lot of 5 stars, like a lot of top, like our top 10 prospects, like those
Sure.
guys, the hit rate on the 5 stars was really kind of unbelievable. So that's how we judge it. So I guess that's kind of all to say. Like it's definitely like a pretty like methodical process, but there is like I would like to think that there's a lot of like rhyme and reason to it.
So, how do you weigh the camps that, are going on this summer versus high school play? Like, is there a percentage weight that you give to each? How does that work?
Yeah. So how they play takes precedence. Now, I think we put more precedence into the senior season. So junior year, you can see a lot of progression from junior year to senior year, and I think seeing these guys in person in the camp setting helps kind of contextualize what you see on film. So, um, the film is very important for us, and I think that's a key thing. Like being able to watch film, assess skill sets. That's kind of the art to this.
Sure.
But in the off season, in the camp setting, and getting all this data, that's kind of the science. So we kind of try to marry the art and science parts.
Mhm.
Um, but you can see a guy on film and not really know how big he is, and you get him at a camp, and you know exactly how big he is,
Mhm.
and you see him beside all of his peers, kind of in that position group, kind of at that camp. And so we have, I was telling TJ, like we have uh, data, like verified data on like probably 85% of our 300 prospects. And just in my time doing this, like it's the most data we've ever had. Like, and it's something like a lot of this for us is data collection, and it's talking to our college sources, getting stuff that we know is verified, using services that have like camp services that have all this data. So we're crunching the numbers on a lot of that, and a lot of our projections, since they're NFL based, and I'm sure we can get to this on individual players. Since they're NFL based, we do have like critical factors that we weigh at each position. Like we try not to have a bunch of physical outliers at certain positions where it matters. So that's stuff we all factor in, and then as their senior into the senior year, we really drill down on the type of football player they are. But a lot of this ranking, especially this July ranking, which is kind of an off-season camp, verified, measurable data ranking, a lot of that is kind of sets the table for the senior year in the fall when we're really drilling down on the type of players they are.
So it sounds like, based on what you're saying, the UF fans who are pretty upset over these summer rankings may kind of have their nerves calm because the senior season rolls around and that's going to hold a lot more weight. So if these recruits have phenomenal seasons, in
Sure.
theory, their rankings should greatly increase, correct?
For sure. I mean, I think if you look at our history of our track record of doing this, I mean, just look at Florida's last class. We were higher on the majority of Florida commits. So I think anybody who thinks that we're really going after Florida commits, I think that like could easily be uh, be kind of debunked if you look at the last cycle. I mean, you talk about like Eugene Wilson, we were significantly higher than everybody on Eugene Wilson. Like Jakeem Jackson, we had Jakeem Jackson ranked over Cormani McLean. Like I don't think anybody else had that. So I think I'll stick by our track record of ranking Florida prospects. But yeah, I mean, I think if you look at it, like we try to operate as fairly as possible. And if a recruit, if a prospect has a great year and it improves kind of how we view them as a potential NFL draft pick,
Mm-hmm.
like we will not hesitate in moving them up at all. Now, some of it is some prospects might have certain physical, dimensions or athletic measurables that maybe playing better might help us a little bit, but it's not like it might not change if we think they're going to be a first or second round draft pick.
Sure.
So it's all kind of like contextualized a little bit. But like a guy like DJ Lagway, if DJ Lagway has a truly dominant senior season from start to finish, like he's going to push to be a 5 star. He has all the physical tools. And there's certain other prospects where their ceiling might be lower just based off
Mhm.
of the physical
Right.
potential. So it really depends prospect to prospect. But I think we operate on a pretty strict like meritocracy on how they play as seniors. I would say, especially relative to anybody else in the industry.
So, how much do you pay attention to those other recruiting sites? Does that play into your process at all?
It does not. I mean, I know where everyone's ranked on every other
Mhm.
site, but it does not. I like that does not like influence where we put prospects. And I think I would say first off, we put out our rankings before everyone else. So it's more of a thing that we kind of like maybe look at after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance, like we put out our rankings update before, like our big July rankings update for
Mm-hmm.
all positions before anyone else. And
Yeah.
this is really, we put it out 2 weeks, I think, before we put it out last year. So we're the first mover
Mm-hmm.
in almost every scenario on recruiting rankings. And I think if you were to track the trends on the directions most of these prospects go, the majority of them are in the direction wherever we're moving them. That's just kind of factually how it is right now.
So do you have, I mean, I understand what you're saying that you lead the way kind of, but you do know where other sites have them ranked. Do you ever, if you're really far off from, let's say 24/7 or
Yeah.
something like that, is there some sort of internal process in place where you guys say like, is there a chance we could have gotten this wrong? Or do
Mhm.
you just trust your eval so much that your assumption is that the other guys got it wrong?
Oh, I definitely will double, like if we're like especially a negative outlier
Hmm.
on a prospect, I will 100% double back and watch for sure. Um, now some of it, yeah, like I think, like given that we know where everyone has these guys ranked, like I 100% will do that because like my I cannot stress how much like my number one priority is trying to get this as right as possible. Like it's like that's like I'm a fan of our rankings being accurate. Like, and that's it. Like, so, 100%. And I think I watch more of the prospects that we're lower on throughout the cycle than anyone else. Like, especially like quarterbacks. Like if I'm a lower on a quarterback, like I will watch almost like their entire season just to make sure we're like, I literally, we had Arch Manning ranked number one. I watched every throw Arch Manning made last year just to like make sure, and like charted his games to make sure that like because we were the only ones who I don't want to say we were the only ones who didn't have him as the number one prospect in the country.
Hmm.
Um, so like, yeah, I think, and especially if it's a hot button issue, like I'm gonna revisit it constantly for sure.
Okay, so having said that, a couple things specifically. Both Amaris Williams and Jamonta Waller are unranked right now for On3, but they're both top 100 on 24/7.
Yeah,
UF fans obviously not thrilled with that. Can you speak to both of those?
yeah. So I would say first off, our rankings on those guys are essentially unchanged months in advance of them committing to UF.
Hmm.
So like Jamonte Waller debuted as an 88 for On3. He moved up to 89. That was in April,
Hmm.
and he has stayed at 89.
Hmm.
Um, I've seen Jamonte Waller in person. I think with him, I think first off, starting off, he's a great player. He's a outstanding high school football player. Makes a lot of plays. He is. I have all of his verified athletic measurables. He's 6'1.5", 240 pounds. He ran a four. I saw him in person run a 4.95 40 at Under Armour's Atlanta camp. I have all of his like arm length, all of that. So while he's a great player, and I think he could be a multi-year starter, really good player at Florida. He is a little bit of a tweener physically, and I think
Hmm.
we have him ranked as a linebacker. He mainly plays like defensive end for his high school.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a 6'1.5", 240-pound defensive end who runs a 4.95. So that's like kind of objectively how we look at it.
Hmm.
Is there a scenario where Jamonte Waller could be a 4-star? Absolutely. But relative to him being a 5-star on other networks or top 100, we simply just don't see that when you look at his measurables and how he projects positionally. Amaris Williams, very similar. He is another great high school player, extremely disruptive. He's under 6'2", 260 pounds. A little bit of a tweener, a guy who I think, also could be a 4-star,
Hmm.
but I think both those guys are probably closer to where we have them ranked, even if we're a little lower than they should be relative to them being, top 50, top 75 type prospects. So, and then I think too, like like I said, like we have cycles at Florida, like where I think we were probably like 100, 200 spots higher on Eugene Wilson last year than everyone. So I think it is certainly not something that is driven by the school they're committed to. Like, it's just like we stick with our evaluations, and like just simply a guy being higher on another network is not gonna necessarily like make us move them up. It's based on how we project them as NFL draft picks. I think that's the most important thing to hammer home with those two.
Okay, so do you think that college coaches rely on your evaluation some, or it's used in conjunction with their own?
I it's hard to say. Like I think early on, like there's a lot of scenarios where we'll rank a prospect, especially early in the cycle. I mean, it's happened countless times where we'll rank them and they'll instantly get offers. So it would be hard to say that the recruiting rankings don't matter. And I think if you did talk to college coaches, they'll all admit that recruiting rankings do matter now. And I think it's great for us. I think that's why there's so much interest in what we do. Is that if you look at the data, it's inarguable that recruiting rankings are really predictive to NFL draft success relative to your team recruiting rankings. It does matter. Now, like we're absolutely wrong sometimes. Like that's like it's bound to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen in the past. It happened in the past. It's going to happen in the future. I think we're right more than we're wrong. But we just try to attack it as fairly and as transparently as possible. And I also would stress too, like we are not necessarily in the identification business where like we're mainly ranking FBS prospects so we can, just have that product and put these in rank the signing classes.
Mhm.
So our objective is a little different than a college team where they're trying to build a roster,
Sure.
and there are values that I think when you're building a roster, whether it's scheme fit, whether it's character, personality, that uh, a college coach would take into account more
Mhm.
than we would. We're projecting them as NFL draft picks, and a
Sure.
lot of it is upside, like long-term upside based. Like we're heavy into projecting, whereas a college coach, there's a lot of factors that frankly we don't have to consider. So our like what we're trying to do is a little different than necessarily a college coach who's trying to build a roster to win games.
Okay, so how then does like you look at a player like let's take Tim Tebow for example. He was an incredible college player, but really didn't translate into an NFL. I mean, I guess he was an NFL prospect because he went in the first round, but I think a lot of
Mhm.
people looked at him from even his college career and were skeptical of the kind of NFL career he was capable of having.
Yeah.
Obviously, he was ranked really highly out of
Mhm.
high school. So is that a scenario where recruiting rankings back then got it wrong, or were there some sort of
Yeah.
immeasurables factored in for players like that?
I mean, I think the recruiting ranks on Tim Tebow were extremely accurate, especially for that time. If you look at kind of where he was ranked, I think he was a 5 star.
Mhm.
Not a top 10 prospect, but the fact he was a first rounder validates that. There's so many factors that go into.
So are we
Um,
talking just where they're going to get drafted, or whether or not they
yeah,
end up
we're,
having
we're talking where they're going to get drafted
a
because
career?
the reason why we use the draft as the metric is it is the only other time in a football player's career post high school that they are quantitatively sorted and you can
Right.
actually numerically measure it. The rest of it is kind of objective,
Mhm.
and there's no real way. Like once they get in the NFL, there's so many factors that determine that
Success or
determine
failure.
like situation and injury. There's so many things where the NFL draft is the only other time after their high school recruits that you could even like really like sort it and measure it like numerically.
Okay, so inverse of this is do you ever see a lowly ranked kid and then he gets a bunch of offers from really top programs? Is there something that then triggers that you go back to reevaluate this kid? Like, okay, we didn't have him high, but all of these colleges do. Why?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, that happens all the time, and I think it's really like I said, it's really important to stress that we are we are not necessarily like if we come across prospects that we identify as being high end, we'll do that, but that's just not our objective. Our objective is to rank and sort FBS signees, Power Five
Mhm.
signees, and like recruits. So being recruited is a little bit of a prerequisite for us to rank you because like it's like a time and resources thing. Like that's what
Mhm.
we're spending our time on, the guys who are being recruited, and and ultimately signing
Sure.
with these schools. So for sure, like that, and that happens all the time. Like it's not necessarily a deal where, oh, like this guy's get offers from school XYZ that makes us rank them higher, but we're like, yeah, like we're like, our mission is to rank all of the guys who sign with these schools. So that certainly plays a role. And I mean, there's so many guys commit so early now
Hmm.
that for us, a lot of times it's playing catch up on Power Five commits, FBS commits. I mean, we work on that all year. Like there's this time of year, there's like double digit commits every day, and some of it is like, for instance, like you'll have guys that will show up to Power Five schools and go to camp, and they don't even have a profile. They get offered and commit, and then you have to rank them.
Yeah.
So it's one of those deals where you just you work on it all year. Like it's literally a year round process for us with multiple classes. Like we're ranking 3 classes at once. So
All right, let's finish with this. FSU and UF fans will find any angle of this rivalry to exploit. FSU fans are having a field day with Luke moving ahead of DJ. And
mhm.
I saw an interview that you did a day or two ago where you said that had to do with potential. So, on that specifically, did Luke move up and DJ Lagway move down? Did that moves have more to do with potential or the Elite 11 or some
Mhm.
combination of both?
I'd say a combination of both. So and those guys, like a lot, like I would first off, as a precursor, stress that how they play as seniors is really going to determine where these guys end up. This is a kind of a pecking order post junior season, post Elite 11. We've seen these guys in person on several occasions. I mean, I think our staff has seen DJ Lagway throw 3 or 4 times
Mhm.
this offseason. And I saw him throw hundreds of passes at the Elite 11. And same with Luke Kromenhoek. So I think I would stress that, if DJ Lagway comes out and has a great senior season and Luke Kromenhoek is, his season isn't as good or he struggles, like DJ Lagway could 100% move back over Luke Kromenhoek. But this is based off of the junior season, the how much we've seen each guy throw. I think the capacity for improvement, the positive signs they're showing. I think Luke Kromenhoek has shown he's continued to improve, uh, whereas Lagway's performance has tended to be relatively static. It's kind of the similar. I think any like areas that he has to improve, um, kind of have stayed the same. So like I think with Lagway, they both they both have a ton of physical potential. I think if you're going through like the quarterbacks in the top 50, those are the two with the most physical upside, and they're actually fairly similar. But Lagway has played more high school like varsity football than Luke
Mhm.
Kromenhoek.
Yeah.
So I think Kromenhoek has shown maybe some more encouraging signs of improvement relative to his lack of experience relative to like compared to Lagway. But they both have big arms. They're both mobile. I think Kromenhoek was probably more accurate at the Elite 11. And I think with Lagway, it's just going to be, he just has to be consistent. Like he has to be consistent on Friday nights. He'll have games where he's fantastic and then he'll have games where he'll struggle. It's with him, it's kind of a little bit of a roller coaster. And it was
Mhm.
like that at the Elite 11 as well. The DJ Lagway's best is as good as anyone in the cycle. But with him, it's going to be just being consistent. And I think it's going to ultimately, um, you know, his ability, like how consistent he becomes relative to his performance, is ultimately going to dictate where he ends up in the final rankings. And I think it's going to dictate like how good of a college player and how high of a draft pick he is. He has all the ability, but I think for a guy as a potential 5-star, you want to see progress on
Mhm.
how he is throw to throw, game to game, week to week. And that's something we'll be watching with him really closely throughout the season. And we really, really tightly monitor the quarterbacks their senior year. And it's after they're all committed. Our evaluation does not like our timeline is a lot more stretched out than colleges when they have to kind of determine
Mhm.
their recruiting boards when these guys are 10th, 11th graders. We're working on it until the days before they enroll. So, and I think that is a major advantage we have over, um, having to decide, having to pick your quarterback when it's that early. And it's why I think sometimes too, you see quarterbacks who might not go to these power programs end up being high draft picks. They're guys
Mhm.
who kind of developed a little later, and that's how that's how you get like a guy like a Patrick Mahomes who went to Texas Tech and didn't have and had 2 Power 5 offers. He had a huge senior season, and he wasn't on the radar as a 10th grader.
Early enough, right? Well, what I'm hearing from that is you actually think DJ Lagway has a higher ceiling than Luke.
They both have very high ceilings. There's no question, and I think it's as high as there's if I was going to pick 3 or 4 guys in the class with the highest upside, they would be two for sure. And you're honestly kind of splitting hairs, but that's one thing. Like we get way more clarity on these guys as they're seniors. So I'm looking forward to going. It's a really fun for me to follow these guys. I follow them every week, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really fun to kind of track the growth. And for me, like like I mean, I root for our rankings to be accurate. I also root for these guys to make it easy. Like make it easy on me, dominate, and we have no issue moving you up. I don't want to have to like guess or project. Like
Mm-hmm.
for instance, like Bryce Young was one where Bryce Young made it so easy on us. He was dominant every time we saw him.
Mm-hmm.
We ranked him number one. He was the number one pick in the draft. Like it went exactly how it planned. If I was going to draw it up, I would have a Bryce Young or a Trevor Lawrence every year. We don't have that this year. It makes it difficult for us. It creates a lot of discussion,
Mm-hmm.
and it's fun to talk about. But if I had my druthers, I would want guys to make it easy. So that's what I root for. Is I want all these guys to play well, and for it to just kind of for them to leave no doubt. So hopefully that's what happens. Hopefully we have one of those guys or one of these quarterbacks just kills it their senior year, and it's a no brainer.
All right. Well, Charles, I appreciate you allowing me to hold your feet to the fire a little bit here today. Thank you for joining me. Can you tell all the folks where they can find your work and follow your rankings and everything else?
Yeah, sure. On3.com is where you can find all our rankings and content. On social media, I think we have the best like recruiting social media account at On3 Recruits on everything. I'm on social media at Charles Power, and our college football, college basketball accounts are at On3 Sports. So be sure to check those out. We have a ton of stuff going on.
All right. Well, we appreciate you. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks so much to Charles Power for hanging out and answering all of my questions. I really, really appreciate it. And I want to hear from you guys. Do you think that On3 is biased, or do you think that they're getting it right? Comment below because I want to know. And also, if you're not subscribed to the channel, fix that right now by subscribing right here.